The cameras had been rolling for 3 minutes when they suddenly stopped. But nobody in the studio, not the crew, not the audience, not even the producers in the control room, realized that one microphone was still live. And what it captured was something the world was never supposed to hear. Dr. Phil McGraw, the man who had spent decades helping others navigate their deepest pain, weeping quietly beside his own daughter. The envelopes sat between them on the stage. White. Sealed. Untouched for 15 years. And in that frozen moment, with 200 people holding their breath, she finally said the words that would shatter him completely. Dad, I finally forgive you. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back. Back to a day that started like any other taping of the Dr. Phil show, and ended with something none of them would ever forget. It was a Tuesday morning in Los Angeles. Studio 29 at Paramount Pictures buzzed with the familiar energy of a live taping. Crew members adjusted lights, audience coordinators briefed the crowd, and makeup artists made final touches. Dr. Phil walked onto the stage with his characteristic confidence, greeting the audience with a warm smile and his signature opening. Hello everyone. Welcome to the show. The teleprompter displayed today's lineup, 3 segments, 3 families, 3 stories of reconciliation. Standard fare for a show that had built its reputation on difficult conversations and breakthrough moments. What wasn't on the teleprompter was the 4th segment. The one that had been added just 48 hours earlier. The one that even Dr. Phil's own team wasn't entirely prepared for. His daughter, Jordan, hadn't spoken to him publicly in 15 years. Not since the divorce. Not since the accusations. Not since the day she told him she never wanted to see him again and walked out of his life with a promise that felt more like a threat. One day, you'll understand what you've done. 15 years of silence. 5,281 days, to be exact. He knew because he counted every single one. What nobody in that studio knew was that Jordan had arrived early that morning with something in her purse, a letter she'd written the night her mother died, and never sent. The first 2 segments went smoothly. A mother and son reunited after a decade of estrangement over addiction. A father meeting his grandchildren for the first time after years of refusing to accept his daughter's partner. Dr. Phil navigated both with his usual blend of directness and compassion, pushing where he needed to push, softening when hearts needed space to open. But between the 2nd and 3rd segment, during what should have been a routine commercial break, a production assistant approached him with a clipboard. The message was simple. She's here. Green Room B. She says she's ready? Dr. Phil's face changed in a way the crew had never seen before. The confidence flickered. His hand trembled slightly as he removed his microphone and stood up. He didn't say anything to anyone. He just walked. Off the stage, past the confused audience, through the side door that led backstage. The stage manager looked at the director. The director looked at the executive producer. Nobody knew what to do. They were live to tape, on a schedule, with a studio full of people waiting. But Dr. Phil had just walked off his own show. In Green Room B, Jordan McGraw sat on a worn leather couch, clutching her purse like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. She was 42 now. The last time her father had seen her, she'd been 27, young, angry, and certain that forgiveness was something she'd never offer him. When the door opened and he walked in, neither of them spoke for what felt like an eternity. You came, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. I almost didn't, she replied, her hands still gripping the purse. I sat in my car for 20 minutes trying to decide if I could do this. What made you stay? She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. The paper was yellowed with age, the edges worn from being handled countless times. Mom gave me this before she died. She made me promise I wouldn't open it until I was ready to forgive you. It's been 3 years, and I finally opened it last night. Dr. Phil's eyes fixed on the envelope. What did it say? That's between me and her, Jordan said softly. But it made me realize something. I've been holding on to anger for so long that I forgot what it felt like to just miss my dad. The microphone that was still live picked up everything. In the control room, a young audio technician noticed the levels spiking and reached for the mute button. But the executive producer, a woman who had worked with Dr. Phil for 18 years, placed her hand over his and shook her head. "Let it record," she whispered. "He'll decide later if the world gets to hear it." Back on stage, the audience was getting restless. It had been nearly 10 minutes. The stage manager was about to make an announcement when Dr. Phil emerged from the backstage area. But he wasn't alone. Walking beside him, her hand loosely holding his arm, was a woman most of the audience didn't recognize. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Phil returned to his chair, but instead of resuming the show's planned programming, he gestured for Jordan to take the guest seat beside him. The audience, sensing something significant was happening, fell into an anticipatory silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Phil began, his voice carrying an unfamiliar weight. "I need to share something with you that I've never shared before. This is my daughter, Jordan. And we haven't spoken in 15 years. A collective gasp rippled through the studio. Audience members who had watched Dr. Phil counsel countless families through their darkest moments were now witnessing him step into his own painful truth. For those of you who watch this show regularly, you know I talk a lot about accountability, about owning your mistakes, about doing the hard work of reconciliation. Well, today, I'm going to practice what I preach. Because the truth is, I failed my daughter. I failed her mother. And I've spent 15 years living with that failure." Jordan sat quietly, the envelope still in her hands, her eyes fixed on her father as he spoke. "When my marriage ended, I handled it badly. I was so focused on defending myself, on being right, that I didn't stop to consider what my daughter needed from me. She needed me to listen. She needed me to acknowledge the pain I'd caused. Instead, I gave her excuses and justifications. And when she told me she couldn't forgive me, I told her she was being unreasonable." His voice cracked on that last word. In the control room, the executive producer was crying. On stage, audience members reached for tissues. "I spent years telling other people how to fix their relationships while mine stayed broken. And the worst part is, I convinced myself that it was her choice, her refusal to forgive, that kept us apart. But that wasn't true. The truth is, I never really apologized. Not the way she needed me to." Jordan finally spoke, her voice steady but soft. "I came here today because my mom's letter told me something I needed to hear. She said, your father is not perfect, but neither are you. And if you wait for perfect before you forgive, you'll wait forever." She held up the envelope she'd been carrying. "This isn't Mom's letter. This is something I wrote 15 years ago. The night I told you I never wanted to see you again. I wrote down everything I wanted to say to you but couldn't. Every hurt, every disappointment, every moment I felt invisible or unimportant. I've carried it with me ever since, like proof that I was justified in my anger." Dr. Phil leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you still feel that way? Everything you wrote in that letter, is it still true?" Jordan was quiet for a long moment. The studio was so silent you could hear the air conditioning hum. And then, slowly, she tore the envelope in half. The audience gasped. Dr. Phil's eyes widened. She tore it again. And again. Until the letter that had defined their relationship for 15 years was nothing but pieces of paper in her lap. "No," she said simply. "I don't feel that way anymore. Because I've spent 15 years learning what you tried to teach everyone else. Holding on to anger doesn't punish the person who hurt you. It just keeps you trapped in the moment they hurt you." She looked directly at him now, tears streaming down her face. "I don't need you to be perfect, Dad. I don't even need you to have all the answers. I just need you to be my father again. And I need you to know that. I finally forgive you." The words hung in the air like a benediction. Dr. Phil, the man who had maintained composure through thousands of emotionally charged sessions, completely broke down. His shoulders shook. He covered his face with his hands. And for the first time in the show's 20-year history, cameras captured him as something other than the unshakable host, a father, overwhelmed by grace he didn't think he deserved. Jordan moved from her chair and knelt beside him, placing her hand on his arm. "It's okay, Dad. It's okay." The audience was on its feet. Some were applauding, but most were simply standing in witness to something sacred, a family finding its way back to each other in real time, with all the mess and beauty that entails. Dr. Phil finally looked up, his face red and tear-streaked. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Jordan replied. "Just promise me we don't lose another 15 years. "I promise," he whispered. "I promise." But then something happened that no one expected. Dr. Phil stood up, walked to the edge of the stage, and called out to someone in the wings. "Bring it, please." A production assistant emerged carrying a small wooden box. Dr. Phil took it carefully, reverently, and returned to his seat. He placed the box on the table between him and Jordan. "What is that?" she asked. "Something I should have given you a long time ago." He opened the box to reveal a silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny envelope. "I had this made the day you walked out of my life." The envelope charm was meant to represent the letter I knew I needed to write but didn't know how. "I've carried this box with me to every taping for 15 years, telling myself that if you ever came back, I'd give it to you." He removed the bracelet and held it out to her. "This is my promise to you. No more sealed letters. No more things left unsaid. From now on, when something's in my heart, you'll know about it." Jordan took the bracelet with trembling hands. As she fastened it around her wrist, something shifted in the room. You could feel it, the way you feel air pressure change before a storm breaks. This wasn't just a reconciliation. It was a resurrection of something everyone had assumed was dead. The taping had gone nearly 40 minutes over schedule. The network would have to rearrange the entire day's programming. But nobody cared. The crew, the audience, even the hardened producers who'd seen everything, they all understood they were part of something unrepeatable. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. After the cameras officially stopped and the audience was released, Dr. Phil and Jordan sat together on the stage for another hour. They talked about the years they'd lost. About Jordan's children, his grandchildren, whom he'd never met. About holidays spent in separate cities, birthdays acknowledged only in his private thoughts, and the countless moments when he'd reached for his phone to call her before remembering he couldn't. They made plans. Dinner that weekend. Meeting the grandkids the following Tuesday. Small steps, because that's how you rebuild something that was shattered, not with grand gestures, but with showing up, again and again, until trust becomes reflex instead of risk. Before Jordan left, she asked him one more question. "Why did you walk off the stage? You could have brought me out during a planned segment, with notes prepared, with everything controlled the way you usually do things. Why risk it?" Dr. Phil smiled, the first genuine smile his crew had seen from him in what felt like years. "Because reconciliation isn't something you control, Jordan. It's something you surrender to. And I've spent too many years trying to control things that can only be healed by letting go." The episode that aired 3 weeks later was edited down to a standard 42 minutes. Most of the backstage audio was cut. The extended conversation after the cameras stopped never made it to broadcast. But what remained was powerful enough to become the most watched episode in the show's history. Viewers wrote in by the thousands. Letters from estranged parents and children, siblings who hadn't spoken in years, friends divided by old wounds. They all said some version of the same thing. If Dr. Phil can find the courage to face his own broken relationship, maybe I can too. The bracelet never left Jordan's wrist. And whenever anyone asked about the envelope charm dangling from it, she'd smile and say, "It's a reminder that some letters are better left unopened. And some conversations are worth waiting 15 years to have." Dr. Phil returned to his show the next week, but something had changed. He spoke with a different kind of authority now. Not the authority of someone who had all the answers, but the authority of someone who had finally asked himself the hardest questions. And in his office, Tucked away in a drawer beside his desk sat the torn pieces of Jordan's letter. He never read them. He never needed to. Because forgiveness, he finally understood, isn't about knowing every detail of the hurt you caused. It's about being brave enough to say, "I'm sorry," and humble enough to receive grace when it's offered. That's the story no one expected to see. The moment Dr. Phil stopped being the host and became human. And the day a daughter chose mercy over memory, love over loss, and proved that even the longest silence can end with the simplest truth. "I finally forgive you,"